Moaning, moaning true, moaning now. That's good morning in the Tok Pasan language, which is from Papua New Guinea. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming back again. We got 2 more days, today and tomorrow, and then we've done our journey of 40 days. So I'm glad that you've stuck with us, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well. We got lots to cover. We got a new book that we're going to study, or a new letter that we're going to study, Colossians. So we're going to do that right now. This is day 39. It's Thursday, May 7th. We're going to look at Psalms 140 through 145, and then Colossians 1 and 2. Verse from yesterday that I pulled out and highlighted was Ephesians 5, 15 and 16. It says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil." And he's talking, that's lumped into just being careful about being influenced by wickedness and darkness once again. And that we just use our time wisely, do the very best we can, and everything that we do, live for the Lord. And so I like that passage. All right, you all know about country music, right? It's usually pretty, and actually, if you want to watch a really interesting documentary on it, it was on PBS. It was actually really, really fascinating, even if you don't like country music. But one of the things that people make fun of country music is it's always about bad things happening or sad things happening to a person. Their dog dies, their wife leaves them for another man. And, well, the Psalms that we're going to be looking at today are kind of like country music. They're all prayers for deliverance by David. So they have that theme similarity. Psalms 140 is a prayer for protection from enemies that he's feeling stressed out about. Psalms 141 is a prayer of deliverance from the wicked and their evil ways. And then also to protect himself from being insincere in his faith or compromising his faith because of these dangers. Psalms 142 is a prayer of deliverance. Notice in the title of that, it says in the cave. So David was in the cave. There's a couple other Psalms that were written in the cave. And that's found in 1 Samuel 24, 1 through 3. But this psalm, you can just feel his sense of despair, that he feels trapped, and that he has nowhere to go. But he was written in the cave as King Saul was looking for him, and he was hiding out. In Psalms 143, it's a prayer of deliverance. Again, he feels overwhelmed by constant harassment by foes. His troubles make him aware of his own sins, so he reflects on his life. But he looks to God's love and forgiveness and righteousness and faithfulness to help him through. Psalms 140 is another prayer of deliverance. I told you, it's country music here. This one's a royal psalm, though, that people would sing, and they would ask God to give the new king victory, the heir of King David, give him a victory over his enemies. And then if he did that, then that would result in the blessing of God's people as well. But Psalms 145, it changes. This is David's last psalm, and it's a really great psalm of praise. This is a great one to go through and just notice how it highlights all of God's character traits. It praises God for being a great king, and then his actions show what kind of king he is. And you'll see qualities like greatness and goodness and trustworthiness and righteousness that he writes about. And it says that God cares for all creatures and all who fear him. But this is one of the best psalms in all the book of Psalms, 145. So that's a really fun one to read. All right, Colossians. A little background on Colossians. Colossae, it was a letter written to Colossae. Colossae is about 120 miles east of Ephesians. It used to be a really good city, or a great city. It was on a river that would lead to Ephesus, and then Ephesus was a major city. But at this time, it's kind of a minor city. It's just kind of a smaller town. It's kind of a market town. What made it really interesting for the church was that it was a church started there by Epaphras. Epaphras came to Ephesians when Paul was there, and he became a believer. And then he went back and he started his own church there. And so this letter was written in response to some of the things that were happening there. There was some false teachings that were going on, and people were being led astray, going down the wrong path. So Paul and Timothy wrote this letter. You see that in the very first verse where he says Paul and Timothy. And it's very likely that Paul or Timothy was jotting this down as Paul was stating it, because there's a lot of I words used. So it's Paul's words, but when he writes, this is one of those times where he writes both names there. And so Timothy must have been writing it out. And it was written probably during Paul's first imprisonment in Rome. Remember, the book of Acts had ended, and he was in Rome under house arrest for 2 years. And this is where he wrote this letter. It's probably AD 60. And again, he's addressing a false teaching. Now, some of the issue isn't specifically stated in Colossians, but you can kind of draw some inferences from it because of the things that he talks about. And so we noticed that some of the things that might have been happening. And the other thing is that it seems to be both Jewish influence, because it talks about circumcision, but it could be some Greek mystery religion influence as well. So syncretic, or excuse me, uh, it's synced together. Syncretic, thank you. Not thank you, that's the word that I finally thought of. Syncretistic, where a couple of things come together and they kind of merge. Okay, and so one of them, these are the things that were negative. It talks about the inferiority. I can't talk. Inferior nature of Christ or view of Christ. It had legalistic practices and observances. There was worship of angels. There was asceticism. That means that you deprive your body of something, sometimes harming your body. And then there's teachers that claim to have special knowledge, so that you can get that from the text when you read it. So the legalistic practices probably came from Judaism, and the mystery, like the worship of angels. They found inscriptions where angels were looked to protect them from evil spirits and things coming out of Greek mystery religion. So whatever happened, and again, it's not specifically listed, but somebody wrote what likely happened at Colossae is that a shaman-like figure uh, within the church had attracted a following and was presenting himself as a Christian spiritual guide. And the person probably claimed to have superior insight into the spiritual realm and was advising the Colossian Christians to practice certain rites and taboos and rituals as a means of protection from evil spirits for their deliverance from afflictions. So Paul writes back to make a presentation of the centrality of Christ and the complete worthiness and adequacy of Christ. It's a really, really strong arguments about who Jesus Christ is. So in Colossians 1, he begins with a thanksgiving. And I just wanted to highlight verses 9 through 14. If you want to pray for other Christians, that's a beautiful outline of a prayer about what you pray for when you're praying for other Christians. But then Paul jumps right in chapter 1, verse 15 through 23 of the supremacy of Christ. It's a beautifully laid out. And then he moves into, again, trying to show his passion for what he's teaching about. And he's telling the Colossian church about, he hasn't met them before, but how he's worked for the Gentiles and how he's been a messenger of Christ. So he's trying to plead with them to listen to him, to listen to what he has to say. And then it talks about the spiritual fullness of Christ. See, don't follow deceptive teachings. Everything that you need is in Jesus. And then he talks about freedom from human rules. This moves into chapter 2. And so all these things, you'll notice this, read through it slowly. He lays out who Jesus Christ is in a powerful way, and so I hope that you enjoy the reading today. Talk with you one more day. See you tomorrow.